My name is Ethan Parker. Most people called me Eli. I'm 47 years old. I've spent the last 17 years in prison, and over half of that was in a 6 by 9 foot concrete cell with no window, no human touch, and no sound but my own breathing. And the crazy thing is, I was already in solitary long before they ever locked the door. Let me tell you what happened. It started in the hallways of my high school. I wasn't a bad kid, just quiet. You see, I'd watch the other guys in their groups, laughing, making plans. I told myself I didn't need it. Needing people was a weakness. My strength was in being separate, self-contained. I carried that like a badge. After school, I'd go to my job at the warehouse, learning to drive the forklift. It was just me and the machine. Simple. No complications. I thought that made me strong. Honestly, I thought it made me smart. That belief that isolation was strength, it became my whole operating system. And it led to my first real test. A few years after high school, around 2003, I got caught with a weapon. A stupid mistake. Felon in possession. It wasn't for anything violent, but in my head, it just proved my point. The world was dangerous. You had to be ready. You had to be armed. The judge gave me probation. My parents were in the courtroom and they were devastated. I remember my dad coming up to me after. He looked at me and his face was just pleading. He said, "Ethan, let people in, let us help." And you know what I did? I just shut down. I looked right through him. That was my answer to everything. Shut the door. Shutting that door felt like control, but it was the first step into a smaller room. The big one was in 2008. I violated probation, another weapon. This time the sentence was 25 years. The moment the judge said it, the gavel hit and it sounded hollow. I looked back into the courtroom. My older brother was there. He didn't look angry, he looked empty, like I was already a ghost. My mom was crying, my dad just held her, staring at the floor. That was the last time I saw them. They stopped visiting after a year. The silence from back home in Florence was absolute. I told myself I was built for it. I told myself I was made for the silence. I was wrong. They had a special place to show me just how wrong. They put me in the SHU, the segregated housing unit, North Cannon, a 6 by 9 foot concrete box, a solid steel door, a slot for food, no window. At first it was just quiet. I thought, I can do this. I've been training my whole life for this. But the quiet doesn't stay quiet. It changes. After a few weeks, the silence started to hum, a low, steady buzz in my ears. Then it started to press in like a physical weight on my chest. I'd talk to myself just to hear a voice. I'd replay the most boring conversations from the warehouse, the sound of the forklift backing up, the guy yelling about a shipment, anything. I craved the memory of a hand on my shoulder. I had nothing but time, and all I could think about was every hand I'd ever pushed away. I'd lie on that bunk and watch the ceiling. My mind became a projector. I saw myself eating lunch alone every single day in high school, telling myself it was a choice, a power move. I saw my father's face pleading with me after that first arrest. I saw my brother's hollow stare in the courtroom. I had chosen the cold, certain weight of metal over the warm, complicated risk of people. And in here, there was no metal, just me. The lesson was being carved into me day by silent day, and it wasn't about toughness. Here's what I understand now. Solitary confinement doesn't teach you how to be strong. It teaches you, in the most brutal way possible, that connection isn't a luxury. It's a biological need like air or water. You wither without it. Your mind unravels. Those walls I'd spent a lifetime building to keep the world out, they were just practice for this. They became these walls. Years passed in that gray sameness. I became a ghost in the system, and I figured I was a ghost to everyone else too. Then, last week, a CO slid an envelope through the slot. Florence, Colorado return address. My brother's handwriting. My hand shook so bad I could barely tear it open. It was a single page. It just asked, bluntly, if I was even still alive. No news, no sentiment, just that question. And I broke. I sobbed like a child. Not because it was cruel, but because it was contact, a thread, however frayed, back to the world. That letter is why I'm talking to you now. It made me see I have to say this before any more time gets stolen. So I'm sitting there on the floor of my cell holding this piece of paper, crying over a letter that basically just says, "Are you dead?" And you know what hit me? The fact that he even had to ask, that I had let it get to that point, that I had become such a ghost to my own brother that he didn't know if I existed anymore. That's on me. That's the final product of a lifetime of choosing to be alone. I'm 47. I've lost my freedom, my family, and decades of my life. I learned the core lesson too late for myself. The strength of isolation is a lie, a dangerous, seductive lie. I sold it to myself hard every single day. In high school it was, I don't need their parties. At the warehouse it was, I don't need to go for a beer after shift. After the first arrest it was, I don't need their help. I packaged it all up as independence, as toughness, but it was just fear. I was terrified of needing someone and having them say no. I was terrified of being a burden, so I made myself an island. And let me tell you, an island is just a prison surrounded by water. Real strength isn't that. Real strength is vulnerability. It sounds soft, I know. It sounded soft to me for 40-odd years. But it's the hardest thing in the world. It's letting someone see the cracks and choosing to see theirs. It's saying, I need help, or I miss you, or I'm scared. It's walking across that cafeteria and sitting down next to someone else who's eating alone, even though your heart is pounding. I never did that, not once. I chose the forklift. I chose the cold, silent weight of a weapon in my waistband over the warm, complicated risk of a conversation. And in the end, all I got was this bigger, colder, heavier silence. So if you're listening to this and you're in high school or you're just feeling alone in your life right now, listen to me, please. I'm not a wise man. I'm a cautionary tale in a state-issued jumpsuit. But I am an expert on walls. I have a PhD in building them. If you're building your own walls, stop. Just stop. Talk to the person you eat lunch alone with. I promise you they're as lonely as you are. Say yes when someone invites you somewhere, even if you're tired, even if you think it'll be stupid. Tell your brother, your sister, your parent you love them, even if it feels awkward coming out of your mouth. Forgive the small stuff. Let the stupid argument go. Call them, write the letter, send the text. Your walls are still low enough to step over. My cell is 6 by 9, but the prison I built in my mind, brick by brick, starting in those high school hallways, was so much smaller. It was a closet, a coffin, and I decorated it with pride. Don't do that. This isn't about feeling sorry for me, it's about your chance. You still have a chance I threw away. You still have time. I'm sitting in a concrete box and I'm just learning this now at 47. You're not. You're out there. Don't confuse solitude with strength. Don't let your pride be the lock on your own door. The world feels dangerous, I get that. It is dangerous. But being closed off, being hard, doesn't make you safe. It just makes you alone. And eventually it makes you disappear. Reach out. Today. Before any more time gets stolen. That's it. That's the only thing I learned in here that's worth anything. The walls you build to keep the world out become the walls of your own prison. Every single time. That letter is why I'm talking to you now. It made me see I have to say this before any more time gets stolen. And I sat there on the floor for a long time after I finished crying, just holding that piece of paper. It was the first thing I'd touched from the outside world in years that wasn't issued by the state. The paper felt different. It smelled like dust and maybe a little like coffee. I held it up to the light from the fixture in the ceiling, looking for anything else, a smudge, a fingerprint, anything human. There was nothing. Just that one brutal question in his tight, familiar handwriting. Are you even alive? And that question, it did something to me. It unlocked a door in my head I'd kept welded shut, because the answer wasn't simple. My heart was beating, I was breathing, but was I alive? In that cell with nothing but the echo of my own mistakes for company? I'd been a ghost long before my brother put it in writing. You see, after they put me in the shoe, after the hum started and the walls started to feel like they were breathing in and out with me, I made a decision. I decided to lean into it, to prove my point to myself once and for all. If I was built for solitude, then I would master it. I stopped talking to myself. I stopped replaying the old conversations. I just sat. I'd sit on the bunk for hours, staring at the seam where the wall met the floor, trying to think about nothing, to become nothing, to need nothing. I thought that was the ultimate strength, to not need. And for a while it worked. I felt empty, clean in a horrible way, like a machine that had been powered down. The guards would slide the food tray in, I'd eat, I'd slide it back. No eye contact, no words. Months bled into each other. I lost track of seasons, of years. My own voice started to sound foreign when I had to use it. Yes, sir. No, sir. That was it. But here's what happens when you try to become nothing. Your mind, it doesn't just go quiet. It turns on itself. It starts digging. And it dug up a memory I had buried so deep I'd forgotten it was there. It was a Saturday. Must have been 2007, the year before I got to 25. I was out on probation, living in a crappy apartment. My brother drove down from Florence. He just showed up. Didn't call first. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he didn't even say hello. He just looked past me into the empty apartment, the bare walls, the single chair, and he said, "Come to dinner, Mom's making pot roast." I stood in that doorway like a statue. Pot roast. Sunday dinner was a big deal in our house growing up. It was the one time we all had to be there. And here he was, offering it on a Saturday, a peace offering, a lifeline. And what did I do? I looked at him. I saw the concern in his eyes, the hope that maybe this time I'd say yes. And I felt this panic, this sheer terror. Because if I said yes, I'd have to sit at that table. I'd have to see the disappointment in my dad's eyes, the careful hope in my mom's. I'd have to be Ethan, their son who was screwing up, instead of Eli, the guy who didn't need anything from anybody. So I shook my head. I made up some excuse about having to work a shift. A lie. I remember the exact way his face changed. The concern just drained out of it. It went flat, blank. He just nodded, said, "Okay then," and turned around and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. I shut the door. I remember leaning against it, listening to his car start up and drive away. And I felt powerful. I felt strong. I had resisted. I had stayed separate. I'd won. Lying on that bunk in the shoe years later, that memory came back with such clarity it was like a punch. I could smell the damp concrete, feel the cold steel of the door against my back. But this time I didn't feel strong. I felt so stupid. So devastatingly, tragically stupid. That was the moment. That was the lock clicking shut on everything. He came to my door. He offered me the one thing I was starving for. Connection, family, a hot meal made with love. And I chose the cold emptiness of my apartment instead. I chose the silence. I chose the solitude. I traded pot roast for a concrete box. I traded my brother's worried face for a CO's blank stare through the food slot. That's what broke me. Not the sentence, not the steel door. It was realizing that I had been given a key. My brother handed it to me right there on my doorstep. And I threw it away because I was too proud, too scared, too convinced of my own bullshit strength to take it. I'd spent all those hours in the shoe thinking about the big moments, the arrests, the courtroom. But the real tragedy was the small one. The quiet knock, the offered dinner, the turn back. That's where I built the final wall. That's when I became a ghost. He was just confirming it with that letter. So when he asked, "Are you even alive?" he was asking the wrong person. I should have been asking him. I should have been asking my dad. Because I killed something that day, I shut the door. I killed their hope. And a man who does that, who systematically murders every connection that's offered to him, what is he? That's the weight of it. That's the cost. It's not the years, it's not the freedom. It's knowing that you had love, real and stubborn and waiting for you, and you chose the empty room every single time. You chose the empty room until the empty room was all that was left. That's the weight of it. That's the cost. It's not the years. It's not the freedom. It's knowing that you had love, real and stubborn and waiting for you, and you chose the empty room. Every single time. You chose the empty room until the empty room was all that was left. Here's what I understand now, sitting in this one. The lesson isn't complicated. It's embarrassingly simple. I just had to lose everything to see it. The walls you build to keep the world out become the walls of your own prison. Every single time. I built mine with pride, brick by brick, starting in those high school hallways. I mortared them with the belief that needing someone was a flaw. I decorated them with the cold certainty of a weapon on my hip, thinking it made me safe. All it made me was alone. And then they gave me this concrete box, and I realized I'd just been practicing for the real thing my whole life. Solitary confinement taught me one true thing. Connection is a biological need. It's not soft. It's not optional. It's like oxygen. You can hold your breath for a while, tell yourself you're tough, but eventually your body will force you to gasp. My gasp was sobbing over a one-line letter. My gasp is talking to a camera now, hoping this reaches someone. In here, you see what happens when that need goes unmet. Men talk to themselves. They scream. They break. It's not a moral failing. It's biology. A plant in a dark room withers. So does a person. I was wrong about everything. I was wrong in high school, eating alone, mistaking loneliness for independence. I was wrong in that courtroom, seeing my brother's empty stare as his problem, not the direct result of every door I'd slammed in his face. I was wrong on my doorstep, trading pot roast for pride. I sold myself the most seductive lie there is, that I was an island, self-sufficient, strong. An island is just a prison surrounded by water. So if you're hearing this and you're building your own walls, maybe you're in high school and the groups feel impossible, or you're older and life has let you down and you're pulling back. Listen to me. I am an expert on walls. I have a PhD in them. Stop building. Today. Talk to the person you eat lunch alone with. I promise you they're as lonely as you are. Say yes to the invitation even if you're scared. Pick up the phone and call your brother, your sister, your parent. Say the words, I love you, even if your voice cracks. Forgive the stupid argument. Let the small stuff go. Do not let a single opportunity for connection pass you by because you're too proud or too scared. Your walls are still low enough to step over. Mine aren't. Mine are 6 by 9 and made of poured concrete. You still have time. I'm 47 and I'm just learning this in a cell. You're not. Don't confuse solitude with strength. Don't let your fear be the lock on your own door. The world is dangerous, yeah, but being closed off doesn't make you safe. It just makes you a target for the slowest, most certain poison there is, isolation. It makes you disappear. This channel, from what I understand, is for stories like mine. Hard lessons learned too late. If this one meant something to you, if it made you think of someone you've been pushing away, or a wall you've been building, then do something for me. Hit that like button. It lets the people who run this know that these stories matter. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There might be someone else on here next week who has a piece of wisdom you need to hear. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, who do you need to reach out to? Is there a door you need to open, or a phone call you've been putting off? Just saying it out loud or typing it is a first step. And share this. Share it with a friend who you see pulling away, or with a kid who thinks being alone makes them tough. You might not know how much they need to hear it. If you've got your own story, something you learned the hard way that could help someone else not make your mistake, there's a form in the description. Fill it out. Maybe your story will be on here next. We've all got lessons. Mine just happened to be taught in a concrete box. There's a book I heard about once in here, passed around like contraband. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a man who survived a different kind of camp. He wrote about finding purpose in suffering. My purpose in this suffering, I guess, is to tell you this. Don't volunteer for your own prison. Don't sentence yourself to solitary. The world needs you in it, connected, messy, and alive. Reach out. Today. Before any more time gets stolen. That's it. That's the only thing I learned in here that's worth anything. Just reach out.